When my son turned off the TV and looked at me like I was a stranger, my chest went quiet. The room was filled with light just a second before, and then it wasn't. The screen went black, and so did something inside me. He didn't raise his voice, he didn't sigh or pace the floor. He just sat there, straight-backed, eyes fixed ahead, and said, "Mom, you need to get out." I remember blinking slowly, like my eyes were trying to protect me from the meaning of those words. I was 54 years old, a black woman who had spent her whole life holding families together, and now I was being asked to leave the place I thought was still my home. I didn't cry, I smiled instead, not because I felt okay, but because I didn't want him to see me break. The clock on the wall kept ticking, tick, tick. Each sound felt like it was counting how long I had left in that house. My daughter-in-law stood in the doorway to the kitchen. Her arms were crossed tight against her chest. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. I folded my hands in my lap and said, "All right." That was all. One small word, heavy as a suitcase. The couch felt unfamiliar under me, even though I had sat there every night for months. The lamp hummed softly, like it was trying to comfort me. Outside, rain began tapping against the windows, slow and steady, like quiet tears. I walked down the hallway to the guest room, careful not to make noise. The floor creaked anyway. It always did. I closed the door gently, like I was afraid the house might change its mind if I moved too fast. The bed was still made, the little lamp on the nightstand was still on. I sat down and stared at my suitcase under the bed. I had packed it once before, just in case. I guess a part of me had known this night would come. Lying there in the dark, I listened to the house breathe without me. I thought about all the meals I cooked in that kitchen, all the prayers I whispered in those rooms. I wondered how love could fade into silence so quietly, how a mother could become a problem without being told why. I didn't sleep much that night. My heart stayed awake, asking questions my mouth never did. I had no idea that by this time tomorrow, a knock at the door would change everything. I didn't know a man would show up with answers no one was ready to give. All I knew was this: sometimes the hardest goodbyes are the ones you don't see coming. If this story touched your heart or felt familiar in any way, stay with me for the next. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel so more real-life stories like this can reach the people who need them most. After my husband passed away, the house went quiet in a way I was not ready for. 32 years of marriage ended with one last breath and a long hallway walk out of the hospital. I went home alone that day, and nothing ever sounded the same again. The kitchen clock was too loud. The bed was too wide. Even the walls felt like they were waiting for him to come back. My son started calling every day, at first just to check on me. Then one evening he said, "Mom, why don't you come stay with us for a while?" He said it like it was a simple thing, like moving your whole life could fit into one sentence. I hesitated, but he insisted. My daughter-in-law smiled when I arrived. She hugged me politely, careful not to hold on too long. She said, "Make yourself comfortable," and I believed her. Their house was newer than mine. Bright walls, open rooms, a big kitchen with a table that could seat 6, but usually only seated 2. I took the guest room and told myself not to unpack everything, just in case. That became my habit, never settling fully, never standing too tall. I tried to be helpful. I cooked dinner most nights. I cleaned up before anyone asked. I watched my grandson when they needed rest or quiet time. I told stories. I sang him to sleep the way I once did with his father. I paid part of the bills. I bought groceries. I wanted them to know I wasn't there to be a burden. Still, I stayed out of the way. I didn't offer opinions. I didn't correct or question. Some nights, I sat alone in the guest room, listening to them laugh in the living room. I told myself this was what family sounded like, even if I wasn't always part of the conversation. Grief makes you grateful for scraps of closeness. It teaches you to accept less than you deserve just to feel near someone. I truly believed this was temporary. that we were all adjusting, that love just needed time to find its balance. Looking back now, I see the signs were already there. Quiet ones, easy to ignore when your heart is tired. At the time, I thought I was healing. I didn't realize I was slowly disappearing inside someone else's home. If you've ever leaned on family during a hard season, the next will feel very close to home. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel to support real-life stories that speak from the heart.
At first, it wasn't anything I could point to. Nothing loud, nothing cruel on the surface. It was the small things, the kind that slip past you if you're not paying close attention. One morning, I opened the refrigerator and noticed my food had been moved. My leftovers were stacked neatly on one small shelf. Everything else filled the space around it. I told myself it didn't matter. People organize kitchens differently. I closed the door and let it go. Then, my mail started piling up on the corner of the counter, unopened, always separate from theirs. Some days it would sit there for hours, like it didn't belong to anyone. I would pick it up quietly, fold it under my arm, and take it to my room. No one ever asked about it. Dinner changed too. We stopped sitting together at the table. My son ate earlier, my daughter-in-law ate later. When we did eat together, the room felt tense. My fork sounded too loud against the plate. My breathing felt like it needed permission. One evening, I finally asked, "Did I do something wrong?" I kept my voice soft, careful not to sound accusing. My daughter-in-law smiled without warmth and said, "No, everything's fine." She didn't look at me when she said it. Her eyes stayed on the sink. My son said nothing. He just nodded, like the question had already tired him. After that, doors started closing more often. The bedroom door, the office door. Conversations stopped when I entered a room. Laughter faded into silence, like I had flipped a switch just by walking in. At night, I lay in bed listening to the house, the soft hum of the air conditioner, the low murmur of their voices behind closed doors. Once, I heard my name, just once. It floated through the wall and settled heavy on my chest. The next morning, no one mentioned it. They never did. Silence became the rule. I started packing a little at a time. One sweater folded away, one photo slipped into my suitcase. Not because anyone told me to, but because my heart was already preparing. I moved more carefully, spoke less, smiled more than I felt. I told myself this was just stress. Life was hard for everyone. Families go through seasons. But deep down, I knew something was changing. Not in the house, in how they saw me. I was no longer just a mother or a grandmother. I was a presence, and slowly I was becoming a problem no one wanted to name. The night it finally happened felt quiet in a way that made my skin tight. No music, no laughter, just the low glow of the TV filling the living room. I sat on one end of the couch, folding a small towel in my hands. My son sat on the other end, staring at the screen. My daughter-in-law moved back and forth in the kitchen without saying much. Then, without warning, my son reached for the remote. The TV clicked off. The room fell into a heavy silence that pressed against my ears. He didn't look at me right away. He cleared his throat and leaned forward. And then he said it. "Mom, you need to get out." The words landed softly, but they cut deep. I felt them move through me, slow and sharp, like they were searching for something to break. I waited for more, an explanation, a reason, but none came. I swallowed and asked, "Why?" My voice sounded smaller than I expected. He rubbed his face with both hands and sighed. "It's complicated," he said. That was all. Complicated. A word big enough to hide everything. I looked toward the kitchen. My daughter-in-law stood still, her back turned. She didn't say a word. I nodded slowly, like I understood. Sometimes agreeing is easier than asking questions you already fear the answers to. "I'll be gone in the morning," I said. My voice stayed calm, even though my chest felt heavy. No one stopped me. No one argued. I walked down the hallway carefully, as if the walls were listening. Each step felt like I was walking away from a part of myself. In the guest room, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the floor. My suitcase waited under the bed, half empty, half ready. I packed in silence, clothes folded neatly, memories tucked between them. I didn't cry, not yet. I lay down fully dressed and stared at the ceiling. The house made its usual sounds, but they felt different now. That night, sleep came and went in short pieces. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard his voice again. You need to get out. By morning, my heart felt tired, but something else was there too, a quiet knowing. Whatever had been happening in that house, it was bigger than me, and soon, whether they wanted it or not, the truth would have to step into the light. If you've ever been hurt by words spoken too calmly, the next will reveal what was really going on. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel to support real stories that give voice to silent pain.
The next morning came too fast. I was already awake when the sun crept through the window. My suitcase stood by the door, zipped and waiting, like it had been expecting this day. The house was quiet. Too quiet. No coffee brewing, no footsteps. I stood in the hallway for a moment, listening. I wondered if anyone would say goodbye. I wondered if I should leave a note. Before I could decide, the doorbell rang. The sound startled me, sharp and sudden, cutting through the silence. My daughter-in-law hurried out of the bedroom. She looked surprised, then uneasy. My son followed a few steps behind her. He opened the door. A man stood outside, tall, well-dressed, serious eyes. He spoke my son's name like he already knew him. "I need a few minutes of your time," the man said. His voice was calm, practiced. They stepped into the hallway. I stayed back, but I could hear everything. Some words floated clearly, others didn't. There were questions. There were papers pulled from a folder. I heard my name. My daughter-in-law's face lost its color. She slowly sat down at the kitchen table. Her hands trembled as she folded them together. The man explained he was a lawyer. He talked about documents, signatures, ownership. I felt my stomach tighten. I hadn't signed anything in years, or so I thought. Then he turned to me. "Ma'am, do you remember signing papers to help your son qualify for this house?" Suddenly, it all came back. A few years ago, a favor. My son had said it was temporary, just to help with approval. Nothing would really change. The lawyer nodded slowly. "Well, your name is still attached," he said, "and legally that makes you part of this property." The room went silent, the kind of silence that carries truth. I learned then what they hadn't told me. They were planning to sell the house. Soon. They needed everything clean, simple, no complications, and I was one. No one looked at me. My son stared at the floor. My daughter-in-law wiped her eyes, but no tears came. I felt hurt, yes, but more than that, I felt clear, like fog lifting from my mind. This wasn't about space or stress or time. This was about erasing me quietly, and the man at the door had just spoken the truth they couldn't. After the lawyer left, the house felt different. Not lighter, just exposed. The door closed behind him with a soft click, and for a long moment, no one spoke. The clock in the kitchen kept ticking, steady and careless. It sounded louder now, like it was reminding us that time does not stop for feelings. My son stood near the door, his shoulders slumped. He looked smaller than I remembered, like a little boy caught in something he didn't know how to fix. My daughter-in-law stayed seated at the table. Her hands were folded tight in front of her. She stared at the wood like it might give her answers. I waited, not because I needed an apology, but because I wanted to see if one would come. None did. The silence stretched between us. It was thick and uncomfortable. No one knew where to place their eyes.
I felt the hurt settle in slowly, not sharp, not loud, just deep, like a bruise you don't notice until you touch it. I realized then that everything I had felt before had been real. The distance, the closed doors, the quiet looks, they hadn't imagined me away, they had planned me away. My son finally spoke. His voice cracked when he said my name, but he didn't finish his sentence. I nodded once, gently. Sometimes stopping someone is kinder than letting them explain too late. I picked up my suitcase. The handle felt cool in my hand, steady. "I'm going to go," I said softly. Not because they asked, but because I chose to. My daughter-in-law looked up then. Her eyes were wet, but her face was still guarded. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. I didn't wait for words that might only cause more pain. I walked toward the door slowly. Each step felt heavy, but also clear. At the doorway, I paused. I looked back at the kitchen, at the table where I had cooked so many meals. "I loved being a part of this family," I said quietly. My voice didn't shake. No one answered. Outside, the air felt cooler, cleaner. I took a deep breath for the first time in days. As I walked away, I understood something important. Truth doesn't always come with comfort, but it always comes with clarity. If you've ever been hurt by the truth but strengthened by it, the next will show what healing really looks like. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel to help these real-life stories reach more hearts. I didn't go far that day. Just a small apartment across town. One bedroom, one window, one quiet promise of peace. The first night there felt strange. No footsteps above me, no doors closing without a word. I sat on the edge of the bed and let the silence settle. This silence was different. It didn't push me out. The next morning, I made coffee and watched the sun rise through the window. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was in someone's way. I felt present. I unpacked slowly, each item placed with care, not rushing. I found myself breathing deeper, standing straighter, like my body finally understood it was safe. Days passed, then weeks. My son didn't call right away. When he did, his voice shook. He cried before he spoke. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said. "I didn't know how to handle everything." I listened, not to punish him with silence, but not to excuse him either. I told him I loved him, because that was true, but I didn't go far that day. Just a small apartment across town. One bedroom, one window, one quiet promise of peace. The first night there felt strange. No footsteps above me, no doors closing without a word. I sat on the edge of the bed and let the silence settle. This silence was different. It didn't push me out. The next morning, I made coffee and watched the sun rise through the window. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was in someone's way. I felt present. I unpacked slowly, each item placed with care, not rushing. I found myself breathing deeper, standing straighter, like my body finally understood it was safe. Days passed, then weeks. My son didn't call right away. When he did, his voice shook. He cried before he spoke. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said. "I didn't know how to handle everything." I listened, not to punish him with silence, but not to excuse him either. I told him I loved him, because that was true, but I also told him the truth. "That hurt me," I said gently. "I needed honesty, not quiet doors." He didn't argue. He didn't defend. He just listened. Forgiveness didn't arrive all at once. It came slowly, like light at the edge of morning. Some days I still felt the ache. Other days I felt strong. Both were allowed. I started taking walks in the evenings. I cooked for myself. I prayed again without asking for permission. I learned that dignity is not something you demand. It's something you carry, even when your hands are shaking.
I didn't leave that house angry. I left clear. Clear about who I was. Clear about what I deserved. I was no longer just someone's mother living quietly in the background. I was a woman with a voice, with boundaries. And even though my heart had been bruised, it had not been broken. I walked away with my head high, not because I had won, but because I had chosen myself.
Life became quieter after everything happened. Not empty, just honest. In my small apartment, I learned the sound of my own footsteps again. I learned how peace feels when it is not borrowed from someone else's space. I learned that calm can be strong. Some mornings, I still think about that house, the kitchen, the table, the place where I tried so hard to belong. I don't let those thoughts stay long. They visit, then they leave, just like I did. My relationship with my son is different now, slower, more careful. We talk, we listen, we don't pretend anymore. He visits sometimes. He looks around my apartment and says, "You look better, Mom." I smile, because I know it's true. I no longer carry guilt for choosing myself. I no longer apologize for needing respect. Those habits took years to unlearn. What I know now is simple. Family is love, yes, but love without honesty will always hurt. I learned that silence can protect others, but it can slowly erase you. I learned that speaking softly does not mean accepting less. Being a mother does not mean shrinking. Being older does not mean disappearing. Being kind does not mean being used. I am still gentle, still patient, still loving, but I am also firm. If someone tells you to leave without explaining why, listen closely, not to their words, but to what they are showing you. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away quietly, not to punish anyone, but to save yourself. I don't carry anger in my heart. It's too heavy. I carry lessons instead. And I share this story because I know I'm not the only one. There are many women like me, women who gave everything and were asked to give a little more. If this story found you, please know this. You are allowed to choose peace, even if it means starting over. If this story spoke to your heart, let it be a reminder that your dignity matters at every stage of life. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel to support more real-life stories of strength, healing, and quiet courage.